So, we live in a strange world, and there's so many things going on nowadays that I think has people noticing that or at least paying attention a little bit more to the concept that of good and evil, that we're in a place where there's definitely good and evil, and I think that the Bible matches the reality that we see. It can be confusing for sure, and I know that not everybody agrees with that opinion. Many people don't view the Bible with the same authority that I view it. But I do think that it answers a lot of questions, and if you look around at the world today, as I do this video right now, one of the stories that's taking place is Little Nas X, or I think is his name. It's got like a video out where he's having gay sex with Satan, and you just the way that society has gotten so uh, confused, and I think a lot of people would say in an immoral way. Um, you know, to that end, um, I think the Bible answers questions. It can be difficult sometimes, I kind of mentioned that, but I'm going to talk, and this is the first video in what I hope is going to be a journey through Romans. Romans, to me, is Christianity 101, and I think it's just filled with deep philosophical truths. And I'm going to try to keep each of these videos as short as I can, but not be ridiculously short, because I don't know how you can be too short on some of this stuff. But anyway, to that end, let me get started. That's my introduction to the whole thing. But let me um, let me start. Romans chapter 1 verse 1. Paul, a slave of Messiah Yeshua, called to be an emissary and set apart for the good news of God, which he appointed beforehand through his prophets in the holy scriptures. Real quick, the version I'm using is called the Tree of Life. I like the way it reads. It has an interesting flavor. It's got a specifically Jewish flavor. I like. There's certain words that get a little weird, and I'll try to uh, put the word that we're normally used to hearing instead in certain places, and maybe keep them or translate them in others. Um, but in this beginning portion, so Paul's basically saying that we as people are called to be, and when he says emissary here, it's most translations would say apostle. And so it's interesting because to me, this reminds me a little bit of the concept or the idea that it's a little confusing of why God does things the way he does, why he allowed the world to spin out of control, why, uh, why he didn't just stop sin, why he had to send his son, why his son, and in this, to the point that I'm sort of driving home here, didn't when he rose, he didn't reveal himself to Caiaphas. He didn't stand on the temple and reveal himself to everybody. Instead, he went around to his close friends. He went around to family. I mean, you could probably say, he maybe less than 100 people saw Jesus alive after the public crucifixion. And you can say, well, why does God choose to do that? And I don't know that I've got the answer to that question, but I do know, or the answer that people want to hear. I do know that the answer basically is that he wants to include people in the process of salvation, in revealing salvation. I think to that end, when people hear about Christ, the concept of Christ, the historical narrative of Christ, and what he stood for, what he did, how he died, how he rose, I think it answers a lot of questions. There's concept of a God-shaped hole. I'm sure people have heard that before. There are those of us who look at the world and think that Jesus makes perfect sense of the world. And to that end, God wants those of us who this clicks with to explain it, to preach it, but not just preach it, live it, to, and I don't mean in a churchy way. I'm certainly not a churchy person. I mean, I go to church, obviously, and I read my Bible, but, well, let me say this. I'm not a religious person. I do think there's something to just be treating people right, living. I mean, that was Jesus's commandment, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you. And I think for those of us who, I think for one, I think we underestimate how deeply depraved the human heart is. We like to think the best of ourselves and of others to a great extent, and I think that causes us a lot of problems in accepting our position, our condition, and then in accepting Christ's atonement. But let's see, just trying to see how long I've gone here. Like I said, I'm trying to be cognizant of people's time here. So I'm on verse 3, and I want to show something, because this is something I only noticed with this particular version. So notice right here how it's got this bend in the next few lines. I tried to research this, and I wasn't really successful. But to me, what that denotes is a saying that Paul is repeating. So when he's writing this, he's writing to people, and I think the assumption is that they know what he's saying here. It's like a saying that everybody sort of starts repeating, and Paul is repeating it. That's a guess on my part. But it's certainly, the Psalms are this way. They're poetic. They have this cadence to them that I think can get lost in translation for us, but it jumped out in the original language. And I want to sort of just explain this and how this sort of works, because it's something I noticed. So I'm going to read 3 through 4, and this jumped out at me when it was in this pattern. So, concerning his son, he came into being from the seed of David, according to the flesh, he was appointed Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by the resurrection from the dead. He is Messiah Yeshua, our Lord. And again, let me point this to you just real quick, and you see how it's got this interesting pattern here. And so it's almost like a folded book. And so that pointed me to the center. It's like it's pointing to the center, and the center there is Son of God. Well, in my version, it says Ben Elohim. So it says, and what I started noticing is this counterbalance that was within this text. So if you go to the first word and then the last, it says, concerning his son, our Lord. He came into being he is Messiah, Yeshua, from the seed of David by the resurrection of the dead, according to the flesh, according to the Spirit of holiness. So you see how that's really balancing out. He was appointed in power Son of God. So it's just really cool. And I looked in a lot of translations, and the way they just got it laid out, I don't think you'd ever notice that. But I just thought that was cool. So and so if you go to look this verse up in, even on like Bible Hub, it even has that pattern, and that helps you sort of see it. So you look that up on your own time if that appeals to you. So it continues, verse 5. Through him we have received grace and the office of emissary to bring about the obedience of faith among all the nations on behalf of his name. And you also are called to you Yeshua the Messiah. So Paul's extolling those who he is speaking with. And I want to just bring out the equitable nature of this. Here's the esteemed Paul. He's writing a letter. He's the one, you can imagine that this letter is going to be written or going to be shipped off, and then it may be copied by others meticulously by hand and sent to all these other churches in Rome and read. And I want you to notice that, and that's the reason why we have it today. And I want you to notice that how this isn't a scenario where Paul's lording his position over anybody, because what is his position anyway, right? He's not pretending to be a special boy here. He's just saying, he's speaking to people on an even playing field. We're all even. We're all in this together. And it's important to know that, because that is Christianity in its pure form. It is in isolation from the rest of the world, but it is a scenario in which we are all equal. And so let's just continue. Verse 7, to all those in Rome, loved by God, called to be, I forget what this word is, kedoshim. I forget what that word is, but you can check other verses and or the translations and see. I think it's not priests. I don't remember exactly what that is, but grace to you and shalom from God our Father and the Lord Yeshua the Messiah. Okay, so there's the greeting. Well, he continues a little bit. First, I thank my God through Messiah Yeshua for all of you, because your faithfulness is made known throughout the whole world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son. Now, how unceasingly I make mention of you, always, pleading in my prayers, if somehow by God's will, now at last I will be granted a good journey to come to you. For I long to see you, so I may share with you some spiritual gift to strengthen you. This is to say, we would be encouraged together by one another's faithfulness, both yours and mine. And so, again, I want to point out that equality that he's talking about. I could share with you, you could share with me, and I think it's important to note that. And it says, so continuing, it says, I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that many times I have planned to come to you, though I was prevented until now, so I might have some fruit among you also, just as I have among the rest of the nations. I have an obligation to both Greeks and barbarians, to both the wise and the foolish. So I'm eager to proclaim the good news also to you who are in Rome. Again, I hate to keep beating a dead horse here, but you notice that he brings this out himself. He says both Greeks and barbarians, so I would equate that to mean people of high status and people of low status, people of, say, the learned white collar class. You could say the white collars class and the blue collar class, and to both the wise and the foolish. And I think that, I don't know how you equate that in else, but wise and the foolish. But there's that equality concept. So I want to jump back to verse 8, though. So first, I thank my God through Messiah Yeshua for all of you, because your faithfulness is made known throughout the whole world. This is where I sort of dive into apologetics a little bit here. Okay, so I started off by attempting to explain that the reason why I think the Bible is important is because we're in a world in which there is good and evil. It should be clear to people. I think deep down inside we know there's an answer somewhere. A lot of times we turn to the Bible for those answers. Oftentimes we're confused. We hear skeptics and, and to that end, what do you say to the skeptic? Here I am reading the Bible, right? But they would say that there's no, this isn't any more authoritative than, I don't know, a fiction book. They would equate it to that. It isn't. But obviously, as Christians, our claim is this, that Christ died and rose again. And this is an historic incident that took place. But it's hard to prove that just from the Bible. And there are certain things that I think can help illuminate this as the truth. The concept, like I said, that for those of us that when we see the world, and when you dive into the Bible and you start ingesting the Bible, you begin to see the world and see that the Bible does make sense of the world. I think C.S. Lewis says something like, it isn't by Christ, I can't remember the words that he used, but it's something about like it was through Christianity in which he began to see the world. I think that means how the world truly is. But you have to get to that point. And to the skeptic, one of the things I would say, that Christianity does attempt to set itself apart in saying that the resurrection of Christ is an historical event. Notice what Paul says here. He says that because your faithfulness is made known throughout the whole world. Remember this, forget whether this is a religious book for a minute. The fact that Paul is one of the most ironclad historical figures in history, in the world, in the world's past. Nobody disputes that Paul wrote this. So Paul is writing to people in Rome. And he says here, their faithfulness is known throughout the world. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is that if you're inclined to dismiss the Bible, I would offer the Roman historian Tacitus, who said that during the time of Nero, that the Christians were rampant throughout Rome. Now, Tacitus was no friend of Christians. In fact, you could tell when you read what he was talking about, he had a dislike of the Christians. So he wasn't inclined to lie and embellish this point. He thought it was a negative, the fact that there were so many Christians in Rome. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think it's important, because understand that the Gospels take place in Judea. It was a Roman province, but it I mean, if something like, so if you want to dismiss the claim that Jesus rose from the dead, then I would ask what you think happened instead that caused Christianity to spread in this manner to such an extent that during the time of Nero, and I didn't look at the dates, I don't have these memorized, but I believe that Paul was killed under the rulership of Nero, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I'd have to check into that, but I know for sure, and Tacitus is writing something like maybe 80 to 100 AD. Jesus was crucified around 30 AD. So you're talking about a span of something like 70 years. I mean, we're not talking about a long period of time as far as history is concerned, and Nero is in between that point in time. So you're talking about a quick spread. Christianity is a new religion to a certain extent. It is an offshoot of Judaism, but if you, and I don't have time to get into the specific politics between the Jews and the Christians and why that's important, but suffice it to say, Rome definitely treated Christians as a different religion, and the Jews definitely treated those who believed Jesus was the Jewish Messiah as something different from them. And to that end, what I'm saying is that we know, so in Acts, Stephen is martyred. We know that historically Christians were martyred in Rome. The question I have is, what was the benefit for becoming a Christian? Remember that the society that we're talking about in Rome is a polytheistic society, and what that, I mean, I don't know if we can truly understand everything, but here's what I would suggest that means. You have a society in which there's a God for everybody. It is what, think of the gods of those days as multiculturalism, diversity, okay? And Christians come along claiming there's only one way. So they're sort of against diversity. They're against multiculturalism. They're against business because the gods were big business. If you were going to take a trip, there was a god for that. If you were trying to grow good crops, there was a god for that. If you wanted to have a child, there was a god for that. If you wanted success at your business, there was a god for that. I mean, there was a god for probably every situation. Everybody had their patron gods they're just general gods that they worshipped. Cults would set up, the cult of that god, cult of this god, and you could see that it was a cultural thing. And here comes this upstart religion that they thought, and in truth they did, want to upset the apple cart. And you see this if you read like Acts. You can see this taking place. And so what I'm saying is there's no utilitarian benefit to Christianity. It's not as if it's not as if you get money for being a Christian. In fact, they're basically saying give up money to a certain extent. You should be using your money to help the poor instead of I would just ask you, if you think about it, what was the benefit? What caused Christianity to spread if it was not some event of epic proportions that took place that convinced so many people of the truth of it? To me, that's compelling because it's all, again, it's here in the book, just if you take it on a historic basis, and it's also paralleled in non-biblical sources as well, that Christianity, it spread rapidly. And so I just want to leave you with that concept, that glimpse that you see here in Romans. And it's important because we all want to know what the truth is. I mean, we live in a world that is insane. And we should want to know whether or not Christ is real, and that there is a heaven and there's a hell, and how that all works and what happens when, all that stuff is important, that there's meaning to life, that there's hope in going through this, that everything, that all the troubles that we deal with are not in vain, that there is hope and there is a reason for all the trouble that you go through. You may not like it, enjoy it. It's a given you don't like that. The tragedy that we have to endure and the hardships and the struggles, can be insane at times for many people. And I think it's important to understand that the Bible does have an answer for that, that Christ is the answer for that. And it may be difficult because he's not reaching down now and saving you. He just says, that help is coming, hope is coming. That you may be in the time and period of place where Christ is dead to you. He has not yet arisen. That Sunday has not yet come. You're in the midst of grief, and it's important to know that Sunday comes at some point. And let me just do the last few verses here. Verse 16 says, "For I am not ashamed of the good news, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who trusts, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. In it the righteousness of God is revealed from trust to trust, as it is written, but the righteous shall live by faith." And so we'll just leave it there. I coming in looks like under 30 minutes, so hopefully hopefully this is something somebody maybe needed to hear. I'm going to continue to go through Romans. I think it's, again, I know I'm going to keep repeating myself, but it's a good book, and I think you can learn a lot from it. So hopefully it was good. And if you liked it, hit the like button and smash the like button. That's what everybody says. Smash the like button. And, share if you're so inclined. So hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks.